Good evening and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting for Grand Blanc Township Board of Trustees for Tuesday, October 9th. And Mr. Massey, would you lead us in the pledge?
Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
With that, I'll ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I would so move if you would consider putting the budget review after we review the Township Board agenda for October 11th, so we don't have to interrupt that discussion.
Mr. Mansur?
I'd actually propose dropping it down to after written reports.
That's fine, too.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah, actually, well, we're going to, okay, I follow you. Does anybody have any issue with that? Okay.
No.
All right. So, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, I'd like to just take a privileged moment here and introduce Mr. Wynn Cooper with Cooper Commercial. And you've all received my list of nominees for the DDA, Downtown Development Authority Board, that we'll be discussing on Thursday. Mr. Cooper is unable to make it on Thursday, so he's gracious enough to join us tonight. And I just wanted, I think he's met everyone here. If not, he already knows you. And Mr. Cooper, welcome.
Thank you very much. I have old friends and new friends here.
Very good.
It's great to be here. I've always been proud to be a part of Grand Blanc Township.
Fabulous. And
Look forward to helping serve.
we're grateful for the work that you've brought to Grand Blanc with your properties and some that are just being built, right?
More jobs.
Right. So,
Big
That's
plus
great.
for the community. And
So-
thank you for your help.
any questions for Mr. Cooper? We're going to be nominating him, or I'm nominating him for the DDA board that we'll be voting on Thursday. And I know that Mr. Cooper brings a wealth of experience with him, not only in commercial property, but serves on the Bishop Airport Board of Directors and
Yes.
probably a few others as well, right?
Flint Township CBTA and Mundy Township CBTA. And I'd be thrilled to be part of Grand Blanc Township's new CBTA.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
Yes, Mr. Massey?
Mr. Cooper, did I understand you to say that you have 4 projects in progress now?
I have one project that's in progress, but I have 4 properties
Oh,
that
okay.
are in Grand Blanc Township.
Okay.
Magna Electronics is in 2 of them on Holly Road, and Creative Foam is in 1 of them on Dort Highway. And we're building the new building, 229,000 square feet, that we're really proud of.
Okay.
And thank you again, Dennis and Scott and the township for your help. It was a fast-tracked project, and you all more than went out of your way. And I can tell you that Magna quietly said that it was the single best project that they had in the world.
Fabulous.
They've been really impressed. So,
Very good.
yes. We're hoping for a little early occupancy.
Excellent.
Christmas would be nice.
Very good.
Thank you again.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Cooper. Okay,
Yes.
with that, we'll open the floor for any public comment. No public comment? Mr. Ert?
Thanks for asking.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr.
I did
Massey?
have a question for Mr. Cooper. When you talk about Magna,
Yes.
approximately how many jobs does it bring to the area, the potential jobs, currently and in the future?
As the landlord, it's a tough question for me to answer. There are about 600 jobs in 3 factories currently that will be combined into 1. And we are hoping that in the very near future, they will expand from 229,000 square feet to 400,000 square feet and add additional jobs. I can't answer for Magna, but a lot of new jobs for this community. It'd be great.
Thank you. That's good news.
It's very good news. And we're looking to add, some people to backfill the buildings that will become vacant. So, in my opinion, it could be 500 jobs. Easy.
Isn't
And
there-
Mr. Cooper, the manner in which they're building that facility also, they're building it so that it's fairly easy to add on to it, right?
We have planned to expand it to 400,000 square feet, and it's I think, a matter of time before that
Very good.
happens. So, something really this community should be proud of.
Very good. We are.
Thank you again.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to work with you on that project and look forward to the grand opening, hopefully at Christmas, right, or in December.
Exactly.
Okay, moving to, since there's no other public comment, we're going to review the Township Board agenda for our regular board meeting on October 11th. And we will be going through the minutes for September 11th, 13th, and the 25th. We have in our consent agenda the treasurer's report, which Mr. Guzak's always willing to answer questions, and feel free to email them in advance if you'd like as well. Yes,
Supervisor
Mr.
Bennett?
Mansour?
So I have just a couple of questions on the the status of our revenues and our costs.
Okay.
Is that included in the package? So in general, it looks like, depending on the departments, we are somewhere in the, I don't know, 60 to 70% expenses. So we've reached 60 or 70% of our expenses on a timed basis. And we're somewhere around 50-some% in the revenues category. And it varies a bit by, particular category. So I guess the question is, and actually, if you take a look at the overall, we're balanced, but that's only because we haven't spent any capital. If we'd have spent capital, then we'd be, kind of way out balanced in terms of more spending than we have reached a part of our revenues. So can you add some color to, to that?
Mr. Lehman?
We actually have spent some capital, and the capital is budgeted into there. So when you're looking at those budgets, when we do the appropriations for no different than the 2019 budget that you'll review this evening, all of the capital improvement projects or the capital projects fund transfers that we put in those appropriations are built in. So any capital that we have spent so far is recorded in that budget, and we have spent some this year. So right now, we're running, when you look at it as by cost center, we're 3/4 of the way through the year, so we expect that should be coming around somewhere around in that 70% range, and by and large, most of the budgets are in that, 68 to 72% of expenses. So we're right where we ought to be. The revenues will come in when they come in. I mean, it's one of those things that we can't control. So we have no concern about where we're coming in from a revenue standpoint. We're more focused on the expenses, and I would say that I'm very comfortable with where we're at.
Okay. And this other question that I have in here, the CDBG funds, do we lose those if we don't spend them in the year?
CDBG funds are given to us for a 3-year period. They get allocated for a 3-year period, and it's a reimbursement fund. So we actually have to spend the money and then apply for reimbursement. So most of those things, everything that we were approved for, we've already gone out and either done or in progress. So then it's just a matter of how long it takes us to get reimbursed back for the funds from CDBG.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on to item B under the consent agenda is that the board will consider the request from Clerk Lane for the rental of the Township Office Auditorium for the Optimist Club for their Christmas party. And I think everybody has a copy here of the facility use policy, which this clearly fits within our facility use policy. We do not allow the facility to be used for political or religious or financial functions, so on and so forth, but this is a holiday or Christmas party for kids that the Optimists put on annually, so we'll be approving that in the consent agenda as well. Mr. Massey? Yes,
Is there a safety issue?
with the facility,
Yes,
with them using it?
yes.
Probably no more than what we have on a daily basis. I've been here for the event. It's very well organized, quite a few volunteers. Mr. Limita?
I think Mr. Treasurer Gugas.
Yeah, I'd just like to comment on, we've been doing that for the last 5 or 6 years, and usually I'm here from the beginning to end. So I'm here, and of course Kathy's here also, so we have at least 2 people on board at all times. And the Optimist group has been very, very good. I mean, they help break it down, and we actually set everything back up. I mean, we clean it, we vacuum it, and we set all the chairs right back up. I said, we gotta get this back the way it was, and they're helping doing that, no problem, so.
Is another question, is there a police officer on site?
I don't believe so, but we have Santa, but he doesn't have a gun or
Okay.
anything, but we've had police officers that have come in with their children
Yeah.
and detectives, but as far as one in the building at all times, I don't believe so.
Oh, okay.
It's all young children that are here to see Santa and get a few gifts.
Right.
So, very
Right.
much.
Free pictures.
3 pictures with Santa, and then they get a little breakfast, and then they get things that they can play with, they can draw things, and we give them little toys, and
If
the
any
Optimist
board
does, I don't.
member wants to come up and check it out, they're more than welcome.
Oh, yeah, it's an awesome thing. The
I'm not sure of the
McDonald's donates a
time.
lot of stuff, there's a lot of people, a lot
9
of
to noon.
businesses that donate donuts, McDonald's has all kinds of things, muffins and other things that they donate, plus there was a lot of fruit last year, and there was.
Come on up and check it out, 9 till noon,
Yes,
which I'll probably stop up for a little while.
yes.
I have a question on that.
Yes,
Is there a fee that we charge for the usage of the,
I put down a $200 refundable deposit, that as long as it's clean and nothing is damaged, we get back.
Where previously, before that policy, we were very careful, but, you know, we instituted the policy a couple of years ago just to protect ourselves, and they had no problem with it, you know, there was no, they said, fine. They just want a nice place that's close to, because a lot of people come right from the subdivision behind us, and a lot of people walk over. It's really a cool event, and there's lots of people that come from all over.
okay. Any other questions on that? Moving on to item B under operational issues, the board will consider a motion to allocate $30,000 from the capital projects fund to McFarland Library for needed HVAC repair, requested by Bob Foote from the McFarland Library Board. This is a project that I know we're splitting it with the city, well, not splitting, but
Yeah, 20,000 from the city, yeah.
20,000 from the city, 30,000 from the township, and the remainder would come from the library commission. Mr. Lehman, we sent out some information a few weeks ago on this. Refresh my memory on that, would you?
Yeah, Mr. Foote, the chairman for the McFarland Library Board, sent a request out September 14th directly to the township board. And he does even mention in there that somewhat the information has broken down from going back and forth between the township and the library board. It has a lot to do apparently with the library board and its current makeup, and then we got an email today that also talked about the township needs to replace 2 of their appointees to the McFarland Library Board, apparently in a ASAP manner. So we're hoping that moving forward, one of the things with the McFarland Library Board is we've desperately needed, especially from a budgeting standpoint, for us to be able to manage capital projects. I mean, we can do an amendment and do a transfer from capital projects fund into the general fund so that we can advance this, but we really need to get to the point with the library that we're receiving like a 5-year capital projects plan with them, because last year it was the carpeting. If you guys recall, Mr. Foote came during the budget sessions and stood up and said, hey, our carpet's been worn out for 6 years and we're really frustrated, it needs to be fixed immediately. We've got to have a better process than that from a planning perspective. And I think once we reform the board and get new representatives on there, I would like to be able to work with that board and maybe present them and get them actually working in with our capital improvement plan, so that our capital projects will highlight McFarland Library, and we can actually have a plan for 5 years, a rolling 5 years average on repairs, so that we're not blindsided by these. But in the meantime, apparently it's something that they believe is of an emergency nature. They brought it to the city first. the city agreed to pay $20,000. And they had mentioned, I guess, the 60-40 split. So I put it in as $30,000 for us. He does say in there that the additional $3,800 for the bill could come out of the library's funds that would have been otherwise wasted on the thermostats that they were going to do for the system. So the question before you is that whether you want to move this forward and agree to the $30,000, and if you do, then we'll come back with an amendment, because we're going to have to transfer some funds over from capital projects to the general fund to advance this to the library.
This is something that needs to be done fairly quickly, I believe, too, right? I mean,
Yes.
we have cold weather coming in, and we're lucky that the boilers, I guess, don't need to be replaced at this point as well.
Mr. Chair, why you
Yes.
say it needs to be done?
I'm sorry?
Why do you say it needs to be done quickly?
Well, I don't know about quickly, but fairly quickly, because I don't believe they have very good heat in there right now, and with winter coming. Thankfully, we've had warmer weather lately, but we start getting some colder weather, I think we're going to have some issues. Mr. Atkins?
I just have a couple of comments on that. So one, I'm just a little concerned. I've seen I was just trying to find the email, but I won't, we've all read it. But it sounds like majority of that board has either resigned or they're no longer in place. We know we're going to talk about that. Is this a project that, I mean, is there anybody left that can handle managing this project, or do we need to take over oversight on it, make sure it gets done correctly on schedule and on cost, or who's running it? I don't.
Ms. Lane?
Mr. Foote is the city's representative, and he's very capable, but the other thing he will utilize, we share Mr. Sapansky in our building department. He is also the building inspector for the city, so he will keep a close eye on it. And the company they're using is the one that has maintained that particular business or operation in the library for years.
Mr. Lamina?
I think you bring up some valid points, Trustee Atkins, and we did have some conversation in an executive officers meeting earlier today about we don't want to try to change all the joint agreements that we work with the city in all at once because of just the sheer challenge that brings upon us. But I think it just highlights another, we don't have oversight over the McFarland Library Board, and certainly I don't have any contact with anyone from the McFarland Library Board. We haven't had in past the 3 years that I've been here where we've had regular reports from McFarland Library Board. So I think it just really highlights the fact that maybe it is bringing the new blood on, maybe it's setting up some parameters for you guys as a township board, making sure that we have the good dialogue back and forth between our representatives, but we've got to have some kind of fair assurances of what's going on. And again, 2 years in a row, from an administrative standpoint, we're kind of blindsided with, hey, we need $50,000 for carpeting, and then a year later, like, hey, it's an emergency, I need $30,000 for an HVAC unit. It's obviously that's not a good best case scenario. We need to be able to have these, especially these types of things, have to be planned out, and we need to have a capital projects plan. So it just highlights the fact that this board needs to be much more actively involved with the McFarland Library Board.
Yeah, I agree, Mr. Lamina, that it's kind of been one of those things where we said, hey, it's working, just kind of, follow its course, and then when you have a problem and you don't have things in place, that's when it becomes a big issue. But going back to what Ms. Lane had stated, Mr. Lamina, is Mr. Spansky able to oversee a project like that if we asked him to, or is that, I don't know what his, the extent, I know that he's our inspector, but does he oversee projects like that, or?
He's really the building official, so that wouldn't be, under his purview. It wouldn't be his role to oversee the project, but
Right.
he's a building official, so I think they've kind of relied on him to be able to tell them that, yeah, this is a project that needs to be done from a building official or inspection standpoint. I don't see him as like a project manager here. I think that it just brings up a very valuable question about, is Mr. Foote capable of being basically the project manager for, reinstallation of the HVAC? Clearly, the board handled the carpet installation of last year and apparently got through that along with the library personnel. I don't know how much oversight GDL, probably Clerk Lane can answer that better if they would be able to provide some oversight in this as well. But it's our building, folks.
Right.
And we jointly own it, and so I think we need to make sure that we are protecting our own interests.
Mr. Massey?
I do have a concern here. As you stated, a heating problem. Now, this problem was not, I assume it was not detected during the winter months, but it was detected during the summer months.
I couldn't tell you when they first detected that they were having issues. I think they've been looking into it for a little while, but
For more than a year.
For
They've
more-
been doing temporary repairs, thinking that would suffice.
So, based on what you're saying, Clerk Lane, I have no reason to doubt you, but let me put some meat on the bone for you. So, they have incapable people, or peoples that are inept running
No.
the show. Well, if they've been doing these temporarily repairs, and they would never brought them to the board, to our light, to our vision, where we could understand these problems. So that means that they had someone working on the project that was
yeah,
inept.
I think that they've had somebody, they brought in D. Kramer and whoever else to take a look at this system, and they were trying to piece it together to make it work, and they've discovered that they've got to put some new equipment in that they aren't going to be able to put a Band-Aid on it any longer. I think what we're fortunate is that the boiler system doesn't have to be replaced, because if that has to be replaced, then we're looking, I think, what was it, $700,000?
$700,000.
We're looking at $700,000 repair. So I think, they've actually, they could just come in and say, hey, we want to replace the whole thing, which would be devastating, but they're making it work with, the $50,000 fix. But as Mr. Lehman said, I don't want to point fingers, because in reality, this is our responsibility. So if I point one finger at somebody else, there's three pointing right back at me. And with this library, it's our responsibility. And shame on us for just throwing some volunteers at it and saying, hey, you guys take care of this. We don't want anything to do. Just tell us when you need money once in a while. Mr. Lehman?
And maybe this is a question for David, but is it possible, or is there any issues with a conflict with a board member? Because maybe this should be also have a board-appointed representative on that McFarland Library Board, because I think one of the 7 of you would probably be much more effective on the board than our at-large township residents. And again, David, I don't know if that would be a conflict of office or...
No, I don't think it would be. I consider it more of sort of a planning commission or a ZBA member, extension of our board. And as I recall, and I've looked at there's a joint resolution that discusses how the McFarland Library Board is comprised. I don't think there's any prohibition against having a member of the council or the township board. And so I think that's probably a good approach to that problem.
Did anybody have an issue with if we appointed somebody from our board?
No, I think it'd be a good idea, and that way we've got somebody in there that can see some of these things and hear the day-to-day workings and report to us quickly.
Supervisor Bennett, so I agree that that's certainly one way to get us better connected, but we would still have an additional township person, right? Besides,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Which we do have, we have 3 appointed members?
We have 3 we're able to appoint 3 and the city appoints 2.
Right,
But right now we have
we have 1.
We have 2 vacancies
One or zero?
right now.
We have 2 vacancies.
2 vacancies.
Which will be,
It's
well,
not,
if
it's
our...
not, it's not immediate. I think a couple of them's gonna retire a little bit later.
One of them's immediate.
One of
but
them is
if-
immediate,
if
but
our
the second
board-
one isn't, is it?
If our board
city
is
one is
amenable to appointing one of our board members to the McFarland Board, I would ask Ms. Lane to serve in that role. If she
Glad
would
to serve there.
accept.
And there
Okay.
are 2 people, Pat DeMarco left in August.
Yep.
And Greg Withers left
now.
immediately.
Yep.
So,
So there's 2 openings right now immediate.
Right.
so
Mr.
Mr.
Massey?
Chair, So, am I hearing you guys say that after we throw $50,000 at the project, that's gonna resolve the issue 100%?
Well, it resolves the issue of having heat, I believe, but as far as resolving the issue of making sure that we have adequate oversight and that we're doing our fair share, I think that's some work we need to do, and that's why we want to appoint one of our board members, and we also need to find another board volunteer. And I think it isn't one of those things we want to jump in. We've got a couple of irons in the fire right now with the fire department, that agreement, and the Parks and Recreation. Right now, I'd like to see us appoint one of our board members to that board and find another board member, and I think be active on that board and just see what we can do to help. But I think you ask if this will resolve all the issues, I think eventually we'll need to look at that agreement and see, how it's put together, and but I think we've got our work cut out for us right now. Mr. Laddie?
And that agreement is not as old as the others. I think in 2013, there was a joint resolution that described the makeup of the McFarland Library Board. The one thing I'm not sure about, and perhaps Mr. Atkins can help us with this, I'm not sure when you were on that board, but I don't know if the city actually passed that resolution or not. But I see that we did in our minutes, so it's not as old as some of the others that we were talking about.
Well, I would have been serving there at that time, and I do not recall passing that resolution.
Oh, really?
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I guess my concern, Mr. Chair, is that,
Yes.
is this problem prompting the board members to resign?
No,
No.
It's not?
no.
Mr. Marco had served on the board for quite a few years and had indicated that, in the last few years, that we needed to find, that she's looking at retiring. So, and Mr. Withers, I think, had a job change.
Was moving all the time and couldn't get back to the meetings.
Right.
So do we make a motion at Thursday's meeting to appoint her, or do we do that tonight, or what do we do?
I think on Thursday we could do that. And I think we've done the research to see that it's okay to have one of our board members serve in that role. So we'll promote looking for somebody else for that position in social media to see if we can find candidates to fill the terms that are open right now. Okay? All right. Mr. Cooper, you don't have to stay for the whole meeting if you choose not to. So don't feel obligated. I just wanted to let you know. So, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you missed the DDA and how we're going to select them for the term.
Okay. One thing, just to back up to the DDA, one of the things Ms. Lane reminded me of is that we need to choose what terms each of those DDA board members are going to serve, whether it's going to be, is that correct, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year?
Right.
We're going to actually, prior to the meeting, anybody that arrives here early, you can give us a hand, but we're going to put all the candidates, if it's acceptable to this board anyways, consensus, that we'll put the names in a hat and pull them out, and the first ones out will be 1 year, the next will be 2 years, and so on down the list, and just do a draw out of the hat. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, so we'll do that.
And just to explain, if I draw like a 1 year, that just means 1 year from now, you reinstate me for another 4 years, right?
Maybe.
Correct.
If
Maybe.
you're good.
Well, yeah.
Yes,
If they
I'm
do a
thinking
good
that
job.
probably most of them will want to stay on after a
Right.
year. Right. And this board would be appointing them, or how does that work, Mr. Laddie?
You mean if there's a vacancy?
When their term comes up in a year,
Yeah, it would be your
this
responsibility.
this
to
board
reappoint them.
will either reappoint
Reinstate
them
them.
or
Right.
find someone else to serve in that position.
Correct.
Okay. Item C, the board will consider a motion to approve the extension of water and sewer service boundaries through an amended operating agreement with Holly Township for the purpose of expanding Grand Blanc Township's customer base, and authorize the supervisor and clerk to sign the agreement. Mr. Limita?
Sure. We currently have an agreement with Holly Township that we asked them to adopt our ordinance. We do provide water in the actual south of the Woodfield subdivision into Holly Township. This is an extension of that. We were approached early this year by representatives from Shannon Fasteners, and they were looking to see if we would be interested in extending our water and sewer down to their development. They have a plan for like 5 or 6 buildings, and without us being willing to extend down there, that would limit them to like 2 less buildings because they would have to build an on-site septic. And they realized that that didn't exactly fit their plans. We encouraged them that they should have looked for property in Grand Blanc Township, but unfortunately they had already made this purchase and started their construction. They do have one of the buildings built. Mr. Potter is here to answer any questions as well. It was several meetings. We had to work with Genesee County Water and Waste, and then worked with Holly Township as well as Oakland County. Genesee County approached Oakland County to make sure that they didn't have any issues with us reaching down into their county. They did not. And so we're really asking the board to approve the proposed agreement and authorize us to do it. What is Grand Blanc Township? Why would we do it? What's the benefit to us? They're going to actually build the infrastructure and then turn it over to us. So we'll have an asset of the infrastructure in the ground if he extends it down to Shannon Fastener's property. We also will have capital fees that will be a considerable amount, and maybe Dan, you may know closer to that number. The 1.2 million in capital fees that will come in. So when you look at it from that aspect, they put the pipes in the ground, turn that asset over to us. We now own it, and that becomes an asset of ours. 1.2 million in capital fees, and they're our customers. We get the ready to serve charge every month, and obviously the water rates. So there's some benefit to us, clearly expanding our customer base. It's always better when we expand our customer base because then all costs are spread out. You know, the more customers we have, the less impact that you have on individuals. So we would hope that the board would consider it. It has been approved by Holly Township, again, Oakland County, Genesee County. It's just a matter up to this board whether you want to move that forward. And again, I'll answer any questions. Director Sears couldn't be here. It's his son's birthday party tonight. He will be here on Thursday if you had additional questions, but Dan would be happy to answer any questions you have as well.
I have a question.
Yeah, Mr. Mansour?
So, Superintendent Limita, you mentioned earlier that there's a similar agreement now with Holly Township, and I think you used the term adopting our ordinance. So would there need to be a separate ordinance action associated with this particular installation or not?
So Holly Township actually have to adopt our water and sewer ordinance. They also have to adopt the county's water and sewer ordinance in order for this agreement to move forward.
But that's not a planning commission zoning ordinance type of action?
No, it's truly Holly Township has to do it. Their
Okay.
board has to adopt it.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Mansour, or Massey. I'm sorry. Mr. Massey.
I have a question for Mr. Dan. Does
Mr.
this-
Potter?
Yes. Does this have the potential to, for our Grand Blanc residents to get cheaper water?
It'll allow the entire system to operate on a broader number of customers and spread the cost out.
So they can see a minimum decrease in their.
I'm not sure you see a decrease, you may see less of an increase.
Oh, right. Okay, okay.
So our costs, Mr. Potter, for, let's say, water, is there an economy of scale that, obviously, our township pays for water from KWA or from the county? Is our cost based on volume at all, or does it matter whether we're built, the volume of water that we're buying, does that come down as we sell more water?
It can come down as you sell more water, but it has to be a major customer. Other than that, it's pretty much a flat rate and a peak charge for see the larger customer base that we had to spread it across.
Right.
The easier it is to finance improvements.
Yeah, so we get some economy of scale on our expense, on maintenance, what have you.
Yes.
by adding more customers to the system.
Utilities, everything.
Right. Okay. All right, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, moving on to item D. The board will consider a resolution to approve inclusion in and support for the Genesee County Parks and Recreation Commission, Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Greenway 5-year plan. Mr. Limita?
This really came about from a meeting I had on September 19th with Genesee County Metropolitan Planning Commission, as well as Atlas Township and Genesee County Parks. If you guys recall, on August 14th, Barry June was the acting director for Genesee County Parks. He sent an email out to us requesting if anyone was interested in answering through a digital survey to county residents that we could jump on their website and share thoughts with their county parks, that they were in the process of updating their 5-year plan, and then they made the request at that time for the community to opt in. All that's needed is a copy of our action plan from our 5-year plan that we updated last year for Parks and Recreation. And we provide that along with a resolution from the governing board here that we choose to opt in with them. Basically what happens is we pass a resolution that says we support your 5-year plan and they support our 5-year action plan, that we're agreeing to support each other. It doesn't mean they own our parks, they don't have any, they don't have any control over anything that we do. It's more about being able to become eligible for grants with an intergovernmental cooperative agreement that we support each other's 5-year plans in parks and recreation. So you're being asked to consider that resolution, there's another, then the next item on your agenda is another resolution, and that is a cooperative agreement between Genesee County Parks, Atlas Township, and Grand Blanc Township, and that would be the extension of the Iron Bell Trail. Atlas Township has done a considerable amount of work on their trails. I'm sure some of you have seen them. And this takes it from Atlas Township, it brings it down Perry Road to Whitetail Drive. Our portion that we'd be responsible for is from Vassar Road to Whitetail Drive. The breakdown that was included in the packet showed the total cost, I think, was $1.2 million or something like that. Between all the grants, if everything's successful, we would end up with about $50,000 in costs that we would incur in total to end up with a multi-purpose path that would then go from, really, when it connects to Whitetail Drive, it connects all the way through to Bicentennial Park or to Hill Road for that matter. And I think it would do a couple of things. Number one, the board has heard, at least for the 3 years I've been here, considerable comments from the Walk, Bike, Run Grand Blanc folks about give us a trail to ride on and expand our bike paths. This would accomplish considerable miles of bike paths for a $50,000 investment. It also, again, shows an intergovernmental cooperative relationship with our parks and Atlas Township and Genesee County Parks. That goes a long way. When we apply for grants, they ask about your other intergovernmental cooperative agreements from parks, so this really would give us points when it comes to scoring on MNRTF grants and TAP grants. We're still working on a local TAP grant, we're still working on an MNRTF grant, so all of those things add our point value, makes our chances of success better.
Mr.
A
Mance?
couple questions. So we covered a couple of things here, and how much of the, let me see, you talked about the portion of the trail that's through our township here. So $50,000 is our contribution toward that. How long a trail is that? Do you have an idea?
Yeah, and I don't remember the exact number.
There's actually a map in
But
the
I don't
pack.
think it actually showed the length. And
Yeah, actually, do you have your packet up on your computer?
So this,
Yeah.
it's section 5 when you look at the
Okay.
map that was included. It's just section 5 that goes into Grand Blanc Township. And the $50,000, really, we have to come up with the engineering and construction costs. I mean, we're talking the Grand Blanc Township share of just our trail, and I don't know if I have it in this packet or not, because I actually had the length was in there on the original information I had.
Well, one of the things that makes it expensive is that these trails aren't necessarily just, throw down some asphalt. They're actually the same engineering as one-lane road. So you're gonna be able to drive an emergency vehicle actually down the pathway. So it's built as if it's roadway.
Yeah.
So,
Again, but the whole project's $1.2 million. We have 50,000 into it somehow. I was just trying to, trying to get a scale for how much this is
So
here.
the initial preliminary construction estimate from Vassar Road to Whitetail Drive, the actual construction, not the engineering costs, were $265,000. And Irish Road to Vassar was $589. Gale Road to Irish was $379. So our 265, I mean, it's economy of scale. It was 78% in Atlas Township, 22% in Grand Blanc Township. And I just can't find my notes on the total length of the trail.
And this one as well as the other one are both resolutions?
Yes.
All right. The last question I had is, so this item E here, the trail is very specific. We get that. It's on the map. We can do that. The other one, item D, this kind of cross-supporting of the road commission, or of the Parks and Rec plans. So we have a good understanding of what our Parks and Rec plans. We've been reviewing that constantly. Has the Parks and Rec Commission, ours, had a chance to review what's in the county plan to have any kind of a idea what we say we're going to be supporting and if it makes sense for us?
Unfortunately, I can't speak for our Parks and Recreation Commission. I wish Trustee Thomas was here, because I know that they got sent the information, much like anytime you're putting when we put our 5-year plan together, we send it out to everybody to ask them for comments. I know even, like I said, it was in August 14th that we got the email sent to the board from Barry June from Genesee County Parks asking us to log in and look at their action plan or what they were putting together. I sent a link out earlier today that just goes back to their 2014 to 2018, but I don't have anything for their 2019 moving forward of what their action plan completely is.
Can we ask our Parks and Rec Commission to make a comment on that, and if they have had a chance to review it and support it?
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
good suggestion. Very good suggestion, yeah. I think one of the things too that I believe Mr. Lehman would probably express some of our concern is that, we generate a lot of tax dollars from our county, especially for the parks millage, and yet we don't have a county park in Grand Blanc Township. So one way that they can help us, the county parks, is by helping to support projects such as this trail. So we're appreciative of their support on this, and hope that future endeavors to put trails through Grand Blanc will get as much support as well.
One of the first things I brought up with Barry at this meeting was that as Grand Blanc Township, we have a perception that we're a donor community, and we donate and we don't see money come back. And yes, our residents have the ability to go out and recreate within other Genesee County parks, but that we really think that the Genesee County park system should be taking a much stronger look when you look at how much we provide to them and what we want back. Mr. June said that he absolutely understood. Chris, when this is constructed, they become the owners of that trail. We agree to do some maintenance on it, as far as like crack sealing or cutting brush back or something. But I told him that we would expect that we're showing our cooperative effort to move forward to come up with some intergovernmental cooperative agreements. We would expect that they would have a much bigger presence with our Grand Blanc Parks and Rec Commission on how else they can assist the township in moving forward. At least he stated that he understood, and that they would absolutely take a more active role. Take that for what it's worth. Yeah.
No, I appreciate you bringing that to his attention, and I know we certainly feel similarly, at least I do, and I believe our board feels similarly as well. Okay, anything else with regard to, sounds like a great deal for $50,000. We're gonna get a trail that's completed that will take you all the way from Hill Road to, I'm not sure where the Atlas Trail eventually goes, but I believe it connects to the Iron Bell as well, so.
Excuse me, do we have a time frame for completion of this? Did I see that in there?
So we need to spend the money by September, I think it is, of 2019. So it is like it's the nice thing is we feel fairly confident that we'll get the grants because the DNR reached out to Metropolitan Planning and said, hey, we know that you guys want to extend this trail and we've got some money available and we think that this is a high priority project for you guys. So we know we were on their radar screen. They brought it to Metropolitan Planning Commission's attention. And then we had to spend at least a portion of it no later than September of 2019. Did you get that, David? Do you remember the?
No, I'm sorry, I don't.
That would be good. It'll give us more than enough time to get the sign painted that says Grand Blanc Township, you know, budget money at work, improving the community and
Sure.
So
making-
the DNR Challenge Grant funds, $50,000 in state funds are available for engineering. We had to come up with a match of $75,000, give or take. Those funds, if we get the Challenge Grant funds, they have to be spent no later than September 30th of 2019. And then it's just a matter of, we would then no later than March of 2020. So we'd have the engineering completed no later than September, and then we'd have the construction completed in 2020.
Mr. Atkins?
I've shown a few people on the board, including the Parks and Rec. It'd be nice to see some of those bike repair stations on the trail now that it's going to be, you know, pretty long distance. I think that'd be a good addition to the trail, but.
Good point. Even some of the bike rental, I believe they've talked with a few entities in this area about, I don't know if anybody's familiar with the bicycle rental, but there's a company that puts bicycles in a locked mechanism that you can, you know, you have to put your information in, what have you, and you can rent a bike and bring it back. And
Yeah, I've seen those actually in Flint. They've
Yeah.
got those down in Flint, where you can rent the bikes right there. So.
right. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lemata. Next item, item F, the board will consider a motion to approve the Hartford Insurance Medicare Supplement Policy for retirees. And I know Mr. Lehman has done quite a bit of work on this, and I think it'll save us significantly.
Thank you, Supervisor Bennett. This is an ongoing task that we went with Franklin Benefit Solutions as our agent of record for our healthcare insurance a couple years ago, and we've continually pushed them to find new and creative ways to help us manage our healthcare costs. One of the things that really has been a focus for me has been our retiree healthcare, because we had a lot of, if you look at our Blue Cross Blue Shield plans, the suffixes 005, 009, 014, 015, we had like 8 or 9 plans, and the reason we had those is we had contract language in varying union contracts that said that they would retire with the then current health care, and that was always taken to mean that they would have that Blue Cross, that particular Blue Cross plan forever. Now, the medical portions of those plans are all the same. The difference was in the prescription drugs. So as those plans changed over the years, the Blues would quit offering one, but they would, they would maintain that. We had $2 drug cards and $10 drug cards, and different amounts. But we've covered those deductibles with our third-party arrangement through Health Equity or Task, depending on the retirees. And so 2 years ago we made the change because we eliminated some of those that Blue Cross Blue Shield, quite frankly, doesn't want to carry anymore. They carry a really high cost burden for the insurer as well as for us. We were paying nearly $4,000 for some of those policies, and yet for the over 65-year-old, automatically Medicare becomes their primary insurance, and this is just a supplemental policy. Folks think they're keeping their exact same plan, but they're not. As soon as they turn 65, it becomes a Medicare supplemental policy. What they were really fighting to keep was their prescription drug card. Well, we convinced them to change, and the board, authorized it 2 years ago. We made the change. There was certainly some opposition from some retirees who felt that their contract language did not allow us to make a change and that they were able to stay on their Blue Cross plan that they had forever. What we found out is we gave them actually a better deal. Instead of paying $2 copays or $10 copays, they didn't have to pay anything. We made the change, and it saved us potentially up to $121,000 a year. As it turns out, looking back on it, it was $111,000 and then $70,000 the following year. So it's worked very, very well in our favor. This is kind of following that same vein. It's looking at the over 65s, and we've had meetings this year with the Hartford. The biggest thing that I wanted to do was have them convince me that there would be absolutely no disruption of coverage to our retirees. We made them promises, and we're going to stand by those promises. But we need to save money. It's the cost of retiree health care is astronomical and growing. What the Blues does, if they don't want those plans, is they keep on jacking up the premium. So they want you to eliminate those plans, but they'll keep carrying them as long as you keep paying astronomical premiums. The solution for that is the proposal I'm giving you now. It's an opportunity for us to save some money, $140,000, over $140,000. It's a 54.4% decrease in annual premium costs if we were to switch our 65-year-old retirees from the current Blue Cross Blue Shield Medicare supplemental coverage to the Hartford Premium Plus. They would have, their medical is exactly the same. The benefit to this is that there is no network that they can be at any physician anywhere in the United States as long as that physician accepts Medicare. Then the Hartford also covers it on the supplemental policy. The prescription drugs, which is typically what people think of when they say they're keeping their plan, is that I want my prescription drug plan. This offers the exact same prescription drug benefit plan. It will still be covered by the third-party payer that we use in Health Equity or Task. What it really does is it takes our costs down from some of these plans. We're paying $2,240 a month right now. It takes it down to $489 a month. The only difference that the retiree should see is that the reimbursement is coming from the Hartford instead of Blue Cross Blue Shield. In fact, there's an enhanced benefit because there's private duty nursing is included with the Hartford, which is not a benefit that's currently available in the Blue Cross Blue Shield plan. So it's really an enhanced benefit. I tell you all that because I've really done my research on it to make sure that when I tell retirees that there is no change to the plan other than it won't be Blue Cross Blue Shield, it'll be the Hartford, I wanted to make sure that what I was saying was absolutely true because we earned the credibility last time. We told them what was going to happen and it came true. And I want to make sure that they trust me on this one moving forward. The downside for you guys as elected officials is that retirees, rightfully so, are very protective of their benefits. And you're probably going to hear it from retirees that you're changing Blue Cross Blue Shield, and they're going to tell you that they retired under contracts that said that they could keep their plan forever. Some of the contract language, most all the contract language now says Blue Cross Blue Shield or the equivalent, but some of the early retirees, it said you were going to keep Blue Cross Blue Shield or the then current plan. They've taken that to mean the then current plan that they had when they retired. But I would look at it this way: if Blue Cross called us tomorrow and said we're not going to offer that plan anymore, does that mean we don't have to provide them insurance anymore? No, I don't think that's what it means. I think we would have to provide them the then current plan that we had. And our plan now is when they hit 65, we don't have a choice of them not becoming Medicare eligible. They're Medicare eligible. They go into the Medicare system and we automatically convert to a supplemental policy. So I think this is a really good opportunity for the board to consider reducing your premiums for the over 65s by 54%, but you do need to be prepared because I think you'll have some retirees in these seats who are going to tell you that you don't have the right to change from Blue Cross Blue Shield to the Hartford, that they want to keep the plan that they retired with. I truly believe it's an enhanced benefit. I will have somebody from the Hartford in here to share that information. What we did last time is we scheduled a series of meetings, and we asked every single retiree to give us a time when they could attend, and we met with every single person who was willing to meet with us, and we walked them through the change. There was absolutely some opposition to it, but I think 2 years down the road, they'll tell you that they didn't notice any change. In fact, they don't have to pay $2 or $10 anymore for their prescriptions, and things have gotten better, but it saved the board considerable amount of money. The best thing that we do is that everything we save here goes on OPEB. And I think the important point here is that we're doing our part, working really hard to try to pay down those unfunded liabilities so that we can not guarantee, but continue to work towards making good on our promises of providing retirees health care. This helps us achieve that.
Any questions, Mr. Atkins?
How many people are retired right now over 65?
This plan would impact about 24 people, and that includes retirees and their spouses.
Mr. Mansour?
So, in the side-by-side comparison that you have in the board package here, I think it's pretty clear where the advantages are in terms of co-pays and many of these other things. It looks like it's equivalent in a lot of ways to the Blue Cross options. So the question that I have is, the one place where it is not very clear is in terms of the, kind of the monthly rates. So, for instance, the Hartford Premium Plus has a $429, I guess, what is that, monthly?
Yes, that's a monthly.
Monthly?
Yep.
And it says for Blue Cross, rates vary per suffix. So is there some kind of a range that, if you would have, a retiree would have asked, how does that work?
So for them, those are being covered 100%. Those retirees pay zero towards their premiums. The township pays 100% of that. The suffixes, like I said, we carried so many different plans. We would take 00, 07, 09, 10, 14, and 15. Those 5 plans would be now collapsed to the Hartford, because those plans are all left over with folks who are 65 or older. I think there was one who actually was not 65 or had a spouse or still had children on it. Well, they obviously couldn't convert to a Medicare supplemental. They would stay with their plan until their children were off and they turned 65. But it's taken 5 plans that we currently carry. That's why the price varies, because all of these plans have different monthly premium costs.
So the relevant comparison then is this last year, the 20,743 versus the 9,860. Is that the relevant comparison for us? The 54%?
Yeah, you're looking,
at the total annual premium.
We're paying $21,600 a month currently. The renewal rate came down slightly, which was great news.
Right.
But you're looking at the 54% reduction.
So what's the magic there? I mean, it's half the cost for us.
This really comes down to keeping those Blue Cross, all those separate plans. When you look at the individual premiums of some of those plans, most of that revolved around a prescription drug coverage. So you can see somebody that we're paying, $2,200 a month on one plan. On a different plan, it's $1,700 a month. On a different plan, it was $900 a month or $1,900 a month. Those plans, all those suffixes, like we said, the township kept operating under the idea that if they retired under 007, for example, that they stayed on that 007. So even though it's a Blue Cross Blue Shield plan, they all had slight differences. But the medical coverage basically the same,
Ma-
only the
yeah.
prescription drug coverage was different.
Mr. Lehman, if I can interject, some of these plans, I don't know how many years back they go, but I'm sure that some of them are have been around for 20 years, and we may have the last few handful of people that are on some of them. And typically what I've seen is that Blue Cross raises the premium continually and hopes that people will move to a different plan because they don't want to maintain that plan, but they have half a dozen people on it, so they just keep raising the rate, and there's some companies or individuals that won't pay attention and just continue to pay it instead of moving somebody to something more financially feasible. And so we may end up with a few of those plans that have been around for 20 years or longer. And they're at the end of their life cycle, and we're going to make the change with this, hopefully.
The change that we made 2 years ago was to move people out of some of those plans, and we collapsed it down. And now we're doing the same thing. We're collapsing more of those plans and moving them into the Hartford. Like I said, it's really an enhanced benefit, but retirees are going to be skeptical about that. We really will have the Hartford folks in here to show them exactly the additional benefits that are provided through the Hartford. One of the other things when you're trying to call Blue Cross Blue Shield and get some help on the phone is Hartford's customer service is US based, and they only focus on retirees. So when you talk to them, they're not trying to juggle or between plans or my family coverage or whatever. The customer service people you talk to are strictly focused on retiree Medicare healthcare plans, and that's it.
Well, and it's a well-known name as well. I know, Blue Cross kind of is the standard that everybody kind of uses, but Hartford, they're very recognizable too in terms of brands. So hopefully that will help us, if this board elects to go this route, to encourage our retirees to go along with this.
And what we told the retirees last time was everything we save, we put on unfunded liability. And that is exactly what we did with the last savings, and it's exactly what we intend to do with this savings, is put it on the OPEB liability. What we're doing is ensuring that they're gonna have health care 15 years from now. If we hadn't made the changes that we made in the last few years, it was a very real possibility within less than a decade they would have been getting notices that we were out of the healthcare business, and here's how much is funded, and here's your portion, and best of luck on the exchange. Everything that we've done has been to shore that system up and to live up to the promises that we made to those folks, and I think this is a continuation of that for the board's consideration.
Absolutely.
I just really wanted you to be prepared, though, that there will be some pushback, and I want the board to be prepared for it before you make a decision.
Thanks, Mr. Lemina. Mr. Atkins?
Just two things. So is it just a decision that the board makes, or is there union negotiation, or do they vote on it? How does this?
So this is strictly the board's decision, because the union doesn't negotiate for retirees. They retire, their contract ended, they're no longer a union represented person, they're a retiree. There has been some case law on this, and maybe David could assist with this, but it's one of those things where could they get together and try to file a class action and challenge that their contracts said that they would have Blue Cross Blue Shield forever? That's a very real possibility. I mean, if they wanted to, but it's not, the union won't pick that mantle up. It means they're going to have to come together, hire an attorney, and challenge us, and then we have to take our chances in court by walking in there and saying it's actually an enhanced plan that doesn't change any of their coverage. So I would feel that we would be able to defend ourselves.
Agreed.
And as you mentioned, Mr. Lemita, we did make a similar change. How long ago was it? A year?
2 years ago.
2 years ago. The board at that time voted to make a similar change, and Mr. Lemita met individually with the retirees, and I would guess that you probably would make the same offer this time as well.
We would, if the board moves forward on this on Thursday, we'll immediately get the information out to all over 65 retirees and start scheduling meetings to have them come in. Last time we held it in the conference room, and we held as many meetings as we had to until we got in front of every single retiree who wanted to walk through the scenario.
Supervisor Bennett,
Yes.
when do, or Superintendent Lemina, when do we have to make the call here? I mean, when do we have to have this effective?
So we have got a 1/1 renewal date.
So is there a benefit to, I guess, conducting these meetings, these listening and communication meetings before the board officially votes on it, or, you know?
I think it makes a stronger case if our board says we're going this route, so that, I think, you know, do we want to leave it to a vote of the retirees? I think they'll probably like to stay where they're at.
Okay.
I think, you know, unfortunately, we see where our healthcare costs are going, where OPEB costs are, and we have to make the best choice for our residents and our retirees. And I think we're sitting in a situation where we see that their benefit is not going to decrease. In fact, they get some added benefit. And the other added benefit is that we are working to make sure that we can continue to offer health insurance to our retirees. I mean, I think if we're looking at similar or some other municipalities, I'm not sure they can make that promise that they're going to be able to continue offering retirees health care. So I think we're doing our due diligence, not just for shoring up our current budget, but looking out for, you know, 10 years from now, whether or not we're going to be able to offer the retiree health care. Okay, Mr. Guzak?
Yeah, and I think another big thing that Dennis pointed out is, once they're on Medicare, Hartford is gonna accept, wherever they walk in for Medicare, wherever it is, they say, yeah, we'll cover it. So there's no question, do I have to find this map, this person, this doctor, whatever? If they take Medicare, Hartford's gonna pay, right?
There are no networks.
There's
with
no
Hartford.
network, so, and right now, if they're on Blue Cross, there's possibility Blue Cross might not pay, right?
Correct, in network and out of network.
Right, so that's a big plus, because this way, wherever they are in the country, if they take Medicare, you don't have to worry about the supplemental, it's already covered. Hartford said they'll take care of it.
Correct.
So that's an added benefit.
That's a big benefit. You're not searching wherever you're at, you know, if you're out of state or wherever, oh, where do we have to go? Yeah, you go there and they'll take Medicare, you're covered, you don't have to worry about it.
Okay, so does anybody have any issues with this, or? Sounds like we might have a consensus for Thursday to move forward on that, Mr. Limita.
Great.
And our next item will be to go over the budget. Do we want to take a couple-minute break, or does everybody want to jump right in?
What did we decide? The future positioning board will review, or is this not on the?
Well, what we're going to do tonight, I think, is what we said, is we're going to review the police budget tonight, correct?
Right, but I mean,
Going
And
back
on
to Tuesday's
Thursday-
agenda, right?
on the Thursday agenda, there was the 2019 CIP plan.
Right, just that we'll review the CIP plan and DPW budget. I think we're
Okay.
looking at doing that
Thursday.
Got it.
Thursday.
Yep, all set.
Does anybody want a break for 3 or 4 minutes, or go right into it? No? Okay, we'll go. And so with that, does everybody have a copy of their budget? And I think everybody received the narrative as well from the police chief.
Supervisor Bennett, if I
Yes.
could, it might be great to have Chief Wiles just come up, and
Sure.
since it is gonna just look at, I know you guys have seen my narrative, and you know that Chief Wiles had made a request for some additional personnel. I did not approve that in my recommendation, but I think it might be worthwhile to have Chief Wiles kick it off and just kind of give the board his walkthrough on his narrative and his thought process behind his budget before we start answering any questions through it. So,
Chief Wiles, good evening. Good evening.
Good evening. So the first thing I addressed in the budget, and the first thing I've addressed in every budget that I've been involved with since I've been the chief, is personnel. Back in 2008, we were approved for 48 sworn officers. That's what we were budgeted for, 48. We never got to 48. We got to 46, and then the economy and everything kind of hit, and we didn't have to lay anyone off or anything like that, but we never filled positions, and when people retired, we didn't fill those positions. Currently, I am at 40 sworn officers to serve the entire community of Grand Blanc. I am budgeted for, and Treasurer Guzek brought this up to me in my narrative. It says 42. It is actually 43 that I am budgeted for. And we are at 40 sworn right now. And that 43 is from the top down, from myself to the last patrolman that we hired. I hope to be at 41 very soon. We've done interviews with a candidate who's in the police academy now. He has a conditional offer of employment. Part of that conditional offer is that he has to successfully complete the academy and then some other things as well. But as of right now, I am at 40 sworn officers. In the next 6 years, 13 members of our police department will be eligible to retire. That is a huge gap in knowledge, information, and skills that the township's going to be losing. There's a lot of professionalism and expertise that the township's going to be losing, and you just don't replace that overnight, not that number of people.
One more time on that number, Chief.
13 are eligible in the next 6 years. So those reasons are the reasons that every year since I've been involved in the budgeting process, personnel has always been included. And this year, I asked for 3 additional entry-level patrolmen for the 2019 budget. On top of that, also our detective bureau. Our detective bureau over the years has decreased in size. We used to have a captain over the detective bureau, a sergeant supervising the day-to-day operations, and 4 detectives in there. We don't have that anymore. We have a sergeant and 3 detectives. With the amount of complaints that are being generated by our patrol staff, calls for service are increasing in the community, we need more additional bodies to investigate those complaints. That's why you see the detective bureau position, another promotion in this year's budget.
Got a question on personnel, Chief.
Absolutely.
As far as recruitment of new officers, are you finding that, the economy has turned around and that we have all-time low unemployment? I don't know if the police profession, given all the press that we've received in Grand Blanc, but nationally with, police being under attack, are you finding, adequate numbers of people going into the academy for you to be able to recruit new officers, or is that getting more difficult or easier? Where's that at?
So it is certainly a challenge. And just as a way of example, when I got out of the police academy 22 years ago, I was out looking for a job. And I would put in applications at various police departments, and they'd call me and say, hey, we'd like you to come test for a position with us. So I'd show up at the location they had to test, and there'd be 200 people just like me out of the academy taking the same test for 1 or 2 jobs. That doesn't happen anymore. We put out notices to the police academies. We put it out through our social media, through the Michigan Association of Chiefs of Police, through MCOLS, which is a licensing body for the state of Michigan for law enforcement. We go out to the academies to try to target some people in the academies. We have recruiters within our department that go out there and actively look for high-quality individuals that would be good fits to our organization. After doing all that, we get a handful of applications. So whatever the reason, it has been very difficult to find high-quality individuals that will be good fits for our community and for our organization. I am not going to lower our standards on that. The people that we hire are going to be our leaders of tomorrow. And if we hire people that are not of our quality, that is just going to bring down our department in the future, bring down our community in the future, and I just won't do that.
How much attrition do we have with our police officers in terms of, do we have much turnover, or when we hire one of these new recruits, they pretty much stay with us, right?
For the most part, they do. Now, we did have just one individual leave. Officer Adam Dickey left for the city of Warren, but he grew up in that area. They had some openings. He went down there and he was with them, but he is the only one that recently has left for another department. Usually, once you're here with Grand Blanc Township, you're part of our team, you're part of the township family, and you are committed to the community here.
So it's important that you find right people, because they're going to be here for a while.
Absolutely.
Chief?
Yes.
I have a question before we move on, if you don't mind. If I understood you correctly, you said you may need additional bodies for detectives? Okay, so if that's the case, there's a need for the budget to be increased or decreased?
So in our department, contractually, a move to a position, to the detective position, is a promotion. And they receive 5% increase in their pay from a patrol officer. So that increase from a patrol officer to a detective is an additional 5%, so it's an increase in the budget of that 5%. Plus, there's some fringe benefits, like they get their cleaning done because they don't wear uniforms. They get a clothing allowance, you know, little things like that on top of that as well.
Okay, but I'm trying to get my arms around this.
Sure.
It seems like the budget is not adequate based on what I'm hearing you saying and based on what I see in the budget. Because if there's additional detectives that are needed, which you foresee, and I have no reason to doubt what you say, okay? It seems like the budget is understated. It could be possible, understated.
Sure, and it's even, it goes beyond needing additional detectives. We need additional patrol officers. I'm at 40 sworn officers, and in that 40, I have myself, I have our command staff, the sergeants, officers, and detectives, our school resource officers. They all come out of that pot. So the number on the road, that's not 40 officers assigned to road patrol. That's the whole organization.
Okay.
Mr. Mansour?
Chief Wiles, so I have a question about this. So we're right now delivering good service to the township with 40 officers, 3 detectives. So I'm wondering what kind of workload model that you use to judge the need to add additional patrol people or detectives.
So there's several models out there. There's scientific models that say you should have 1.5 officers per 1,000 residents, 2.5 officers per 1,000 residents. Either of those models, we currently don't meet. I don't give a lot of credit to those models myself. For me, it's what level of service do you want to be able to provide to your community. We do pretty darn good right now. We provide exceptional service to our residents. However, we continually see calls for service increasing. We see self-initiated activities increasing. We see community engagement programs increasing. At some point, the rubber's got to hit the road. We see growth in the township. You know, we have the Tech Village, we have potential Myers, we have Holly Road Corridor, we have the Dordt Extension coming in. We have all the visitors that come into the community to see all those things. We have like we talked about, was it last month with the legalization of marijuana. Those things all on the table, which lead to believe that we need, I believe we need additional officers to be able to provide that continued exceptional service to our residents.
One of the things, Chief, that you know, when we look at fire service, we look at, you know, response time. And, you know, as population grows in our township, it makes it tougher for the fire department to get to those scenes, you know, because of traffic and there's more of them, you know. But I imagine the same thing happens with police, that as we grow, I mean, if you're on a call over here, let's say in the northeast portion of the township, and the group that, or the couple of officers that cover that area are occupied with some other situation, the response time is going to be slowed because somebody from another area is going to have to go there, right?
Potentially, yes. And, you know, we take measures to increase or reduce our response time. You know, we have the township split up into 4 districts. There's always an officer assigned to those districts. However, if they are tied up on something self-initiated, like a traffic stop that turns into an arrest of some sort, if they're on a call for service, if they're, you know, doing whatever, obviously they can't respond to other calls for service. So in reference to your point, yes, if they're tied up, certainly that will increase response time to other calls for service. And we've seen a trend of increasing calls for service over the last few years in the township.
So is our response time going up or down?
It's been pretty consistent, anywhere between 4.5 and 4.7 minutes to respond to a call.
But it's probably becoming more of a challenge, I would
Absolutely.
guess, as you have more calls. I don't know.
Absolutely.
Have we seen the number of calls? And you mentioned that.
Yep, number of calls have been on the increase. And not just number of calls, but number of self-initiated activity. You know, calls for service is one thing when you're policing the community. Traffic safety is the other component. You know, we are blessed to have officers that are committed to traffic safety. A lot of organizations don't have that, and we see the results of that in our reduced fatalities, reduced crashes overall. There was just an article in MLive today about the number of crashes in jurisdictions across the state as a result of distracted driving, top 51 places. You didn't see Grand Blanc Township in that list. However, you did see places like Flint Township. You did see places like Bloomfield Township, Rochester Hills, City of Flint. But we weren't there because of our commitment to traffic safety and reducing those crashes.
It's a good point, because we're, you know, in the top 20 of townships in the state in terms of size. Mr. Mansour?
So, it's just a question, this isn't probably peculiar to the police, but what kind of economics are built into the year-over-year increase in the budget? 2%, 3%, what?
You mean like an automatic increase that we just add in?
That, or, you know, we understand there's gonna be, you
Cost
know,
of-
yeah, just cost
Plus
because
the
of union
union
contracts, et cetera, et cetera.
That's really predicated on, like, when we look at salaries and wages, we know that the union contractual for 2019 was 2.75%. So
So it's built into this as well.
That's built into our budget. And then from a healthcare cost, we, you know, obviously there could be some changes if we were to adopt the retiree healthcare and things like that, but we generally have a pretty good feel of where that's gonna come in. We ask for the numbers in advance and know that it's a 1% decrease or a 4% increase or whatever, so it changes, depends on the line item.
Chief, I've got a crazy question to ask you. But if we were having a deficit budget here, and we said, you know what, we've got to cut your budget, would there be an area that you know that you could cut, or?
It's funny, was it last year before, I don't recall, but I had this conversation with the superintendent, and it was not easy. I was tasked with trying to find areas to cut to meet a certain number. And, you know, the vast majority of any department's budget is their personnel. You know, I can cut little programs, I can stop some, you know, computer programs or something, or their database, you know, software subscriptions, that kind of stuff, but that's not gonna cover any significant amount of funding in my budget. Personnel is where you're gonna get those cuts.
Right. Yes, Mr. Atkins?
I don't know if we're going in any order, if it's just okay to let it rip now, but I have a few, get to the juicy one, past page one. Couple questions, I don't want to
No, go right ahead.
let everybody have a chance, but, so question one, so still on your cover page here, in 2008, 48 sworn officers, 46 of those positions were filled, and then fast forward 10 years later, we have 40. What was the population in 2008 versus now? Does anybody have, I'm not holding anybody to a number, but is it?
Yeah, we did the census in 2010. I don't know what the previous census was before
What
that.
Do you want me to answer?
Sure.
I can.
If you know the numbers.
We went up 16% in 2010 to the 37,508, and we were at 29,700 in 2000.
Thank you, Ms. Lane.
And then in the overtime wages section, you talk about the Ally Challenge, which was good, and you know, kudos to the police department. You guys had a great presence out there, and it was a great event. Is that 15,000 is for the overtime to cover that going forward? Did you take any data from what it actually cost for this recent event, or is that just what you think it would take your department to cover the 3 days?
It was a little of both.
Okay.
And just for the board's information, we have staff out at Warwick Hills week-long. It's not just for the 3 competitive days of the tournament. Starting Monday, we have staff there through Sunday of the final day of the tournament. Now, the people at Ally, they do provide some reimbursement. There's certain spots that they say, we want an officer standing here and we're gonna pay for it. That's about $12,000. This number was put in prior to knowing exactly what it cost us, just the timing of how everything laid out. That $15,000, while that would be very nice, that will not cover what we paid this year in overtime out of the police department's budget.
Less than what you paid?
It will not. That $15,000 will not cover what we are paying out of the township police
How
department
much
budget.
how much, do you have a number?
About $30,000.
Okay.
Do you expect the 12,000 that the Ally Challenge covered, is that some sort of an agreement we have going forward, or?
It's not a written agreement at all, but those are spots that they mandated that we have a person at. So
Okay.
we provided, at their expense, a person for those spots.
Is it more like security for the players, or is
Yeah,
it?
there's some certain spots around the clubhouse where limited access. There are some players inside with player entry only.
Okay.
Where they take money at gates around the course, that kind of stuff.
And then one more, and then I'll
Yeah,
let
go right ahead.
pass the. So this is a little touchy, and I'm totally supportive of it, but I'm just trying to understand it because of my history with being on the city council. So I know some of the arrangements there with the liaison coverage for the school. You know, the city provides it for the high school. So could you just explain two things to me to make sure I'm reading it correctly? Is the two school liaison officers we provide as the township is for the middle schools?
Correct.
And in the budget, it says 60,000. That's not per person, correct? That's total?
It is 30,000 per officer.
And that's, you know, you figure that's roughly, what, 10 months out of the year that they're tied, that they're into the school?
Approximately.
September, June, something
Right.
like that. You know, if you look back at, the $60,000 has been a fixed number for a long time, going back to 2015, maybe even beyond that. Our costs have gone up, and I think the schools realize that. They understand costs go up. If I'm not mistaken, maybe you know, but I thought in the city, I believe the liaison officer there was getting somewhere north of 40 or 45,000, just the one officer for being at the high school. Does that sound correct?
I know they were receiving more than the 30, and I can tell you, just, I don't mean to interrupt, but we have an agreement, written agreement with the schools for
Okay.
our resource officers, and our agreement recently expired. So I sat down and spoke with Superintendent Garner at the school to look at our agreement, see if there's anything that wanted to be changed. And we were both very happy with the wording and the agreement. The one thing I asked him I'd like to revisit, though, is the reimbursement for our two SROs. He and the board were more than willing to look at that and talk about that, and what we came up with was, instead of the $30,000 per officer, this year it's going to be $34,000 per officer. Next year it's $37,000 per officer. The following 2 years it's $40,000 per officer. So we addressed some of those concerns in redoing that paperwork and contract with the schools really just a few weeks ago.
That's good news. That's good.
Chief, what does having that resource officer in the school do? I would imagine, I'm not saying what do they do, but what does that do for our community policing? Because obviously they get to interact with the students so that when even they're not in school, it probably has some benefit, right?
I tell you, if the board ever came to the decision where, you know, Chief, we don't want SROs in our middle schools anymore, you guys would have a fight on your hands. The parents love those guys, the teachers and the staff at the schools love those guys. It's not a question of what they do, it's what don't they do. And not just on the clock, but after the clock, they're involved in mentoring programs. They go on trips with these kids and faculty to, you know, Cedar Point or whatever, and all these things. But they also, they do work there, obviously. And then they're to ensure the safety of the students and the staff there. They've worked closely with the schools and the school board there to develop an emergency action plan, which was redone. They have trained the entire school district in ALICE, which is active shooter, you know, active aggression type techniques, which enhance the traditional lockdown. And I will say, in both those cases, with their emergency action plan and the ALICE training, our two SROs, I'll put them up against any SROs. They were the leaders in the county. We were the first school district in the county to do that, and our two officers were the first two ALICE instructors in the county, and took that to the school board and Superintendent Garner and got that done, and it's just a huge benefit. And we see that now, all these other districts are trying to catch up to Grand Blanc schools because of the work of our two SROs. On a side note, their professionalism is outstanding. Currently, there's an SRO association in Genesee County. Dan Wuschlager is the president of that association. John Swartz is the vice president of that association. So it tells you what their colleagues think of them in those positions as well.
But I mean, even in terms of, you know, I would have to guess that our young people, you know, being that they see a police officer and develop a relationship with them, that
There's no doubt.
even after hours, their image of a police officer might be changed a little bit by their interaction at school.
Yeah, and it's not just the middle schools. They each are assigned in a middle school, and most of their time is in that middle school, but they also take we call them feeder elementary schools. You know, so the 5 elementary schools, they're also responsible for that. You know, we recently started a new program at Reed Elementary where the president of the PTO there contacted us and said, hey, would it be possible just to have an officer stop in and have lunch with our kids maybe once every 2 weeks, just so they can see an officer once in a while? And we said, absolutely. So we did that. And then I went to the first one and had lunch with the kids there, and the kids, that's Dan Wuschlager's feeder school. And where's Officer Dan? Is Officer Dan coming too? I mean, all these elementary kids know these guys, love these guys, and look up to them and want to be around them.
Yes, Mr. Mansour.
I'm taking rifle shots here like Trustee Atkins.
Did you have anything else you wanted to present? Or that you wanted?
I'll answer questions. If there's anything I think's left out, I'll shoot after that.
Okay, so I'm looking at the kind of planning for expenses, specifically on the contingent part-time wage line item. So we kind of have a $90,000 projection in there for that. Amended budget was that proposed activity was that. It looks like in the prior years and even through 2018, even kind of despite the Ally Challenge, other demands, that's kind of running around 50,000 or, you know, $40,000 less than the plan here. What is there that you're contemplating for 19? And actually, Superintendent Lehman supported the increase. So what are you contemplating for 19 that would increase it? Or?
Yeah, our contingent employee wages, those are our part-time
Sure.
dispatcher / clerical personnel. So we have a few things that we're doing. First of all, they fill in when our full-time dispatchers / clerical personnel are on vacations, on past days, or as a second person in the dispatch center during first or second shift. We always have 2 people there to answer phones and answer the radio. But in addition to that, we're going through a process in our evidence room. You know, the evidence room is kind of the forgotten portion of the police department. All that property and all that stuff we take in, we got to do something with that. And it's not just you throw it in a closet and forget about it. There's a system behind that and a way to categorize all that stuff, file all that stuff, and then you're responsible for it. And there's a retention schedule for that stuff. So we just don't hang on to it forever. We hang on until a case is adjudicated or until the law says we can get rid of it. But it's a process to get all that stuff out of there. Now, I do have a full-time person down in the evidence room that takes in that stuff, makes sure it gets to court, gets to the lab, that kind of stuff. But we use our contingent people also for that aspect, to help with the disposal of that stuff, to help with our auditing process. You know, we can have all the processes in the world, but if you're not doing it right, it doesn't do any good. And part of that auditing process, we utilize some of those contingent employees for. Also, back when the Detective Bureau was at full staff, we had a full-time employee as their secretary back there. We don't have that anymore. Those guys are typing their own warrants. They're doing their own circuit court histories. I know you don't really understand what that is, but a circuit court history could be 10, 15, 20 pages all typed. You know, interviews, when they're interviewing people and then the courts want transcripts, those have to be typed by someone. The plan is to use those contingent employees to be able to do that, since we don't have that full-time person back there. So there's a couple of the additional projects that we planned on using those contingent employees for.
It's probably much more cost-effective for us to use a contingent employee than to have one of our officers typing, right?
It is, for sure. Especially when the Detective Bureau is, you know, a 3-person unit and they have other cases they're working. They can't just sit for hours typing a circuit court history or typing an interview. They got other cases they have to work.
But there are other options. I mean, there are companies that specifically do transcriptions and could help with that. I mean,
There are, and we haven't looked into that. You know, those people, they know our system, they know what we're trying to accomplish, and they know how we do things, where some of those other companies, I'm sure they could learn that, but these people hitting the ground running, they can do it.
Okay.
Who's next? Mr. Massey?
Yes. As you were talking, Chief, I came up with a number for the future. You want to add 3 more people to the detective department? Was it 3?
No, it's 3 additional officers to the department.
3
So we're
additional.
currently budgeted for 43. In this budget request, I requested 3 more to get us up to 46.
Okay. But if you throw the marijuana factor in there, I came up with about 10 overall officers. Because you mentioned that you're gonna have to have special training for a officer to detect when a driver is whatever, is not normal, from smoking marijuana. Is that true?
That is true, there's special training for that.
Okay, so for that, you would need about 2 officers, I would think, in case one is out ill or something, you would need a.
So what we do is, we could take it even a step beyond that. Every officer in our department is A-RIDE certified, A-RIDE trained. And A-RIDE is the class which allows them to better detect impairment on the basis of drug impairment. So we don't just have 1 or 2, we have the whole department. But it takes resources to do that. I mean, it's not easy to get all those people trained, because we're still responsible for staffing, the roads in the community for taking those calls for service.
What happens, and I have to get the consensus of the superintendent and the supervisor, what happened if we came up with a budget, a spreadsheet of a budget, incorporating, anticipating that the marijuana law is gonna go into effect, okay? For a possible 10 more officers, including detectives. Do you think that's a feasible?
You throw out that 10 number, and that would get us up to, 50 sworn. I can very easily see Grand Blanc Township being over a 50-person sworn department, especially with some of the things that we discussed, whether it's the legalization of marijuana, Tech Village taking off, the Holly Road corridor taking off. You got Myers property sitting down there. Who knows what's going to happen with that? I can tell you, we spend a lot of time at Walmart, and if Myers comes, we will spend a lot of time at Myers. And that takes people. And, there's some legislation in the works to try to reimburse some of the communities for their exorbitant amount of time they spend there, but it's not here yet. And who knows what's going to happen with that. So looking towards the future, easily I could see Grand Blanc Township being over a 50-person department.
So what
If you were to do that right now, though, I would come back and ask you, where do you want the $1 million in salary and wages to come from, plus the cost of the vehicles, guns, uniforms? I mean, I'd need $1.2 million from somewhere else out of this budget.
So how many mills would that be?
So just,
$1
just
mil.
Just to piggyback on that.
1 mil approximately
extra mil.
raises, how much, Dennis? 1
It'll
mil?
bring you in about between $1.2, $1.3 million.
1 mil does. And currently our millage for police,
Currently, you're at .93 or whatever because of the Headley rollback, but the expiring millage was for 1 mil with the rollback at, 0.9.
right now though, we're looking at a police budget of 7.5 million, correct?
Yes.
So the 1
That
mil
doesn't include the payment that we do for the
building.
building as well.
So we're at about 7.5 million. What's that, Mr. Kruzak?
I don't believe the vehicles are in this budget either.
That would come out of capital projects.
Right.
You're
Right.
you're probably running around $8.3 million a year.
So 8.3 million, and currently the 0.9 mils that we charge, or that our residents pay, is approximately what dollar amount?
$1 million.
$1 million. So we're covering about, 1/8 of the cost with that millage. Ms. Lane?
Well, in addition to that, that doesn't also include in this budget all of the unfunded liability that
Right.
we're spending extra money to finance.
Right. Mr. Atkins?
Well, and I felt really good highlighting some of these small dollar ones to talk about, but those are some big numbers. But I do have a couple more questions to continue here. Okay, so I think, Mr. Lehman, I think you just mentioned then, so more officers means more cars, right? And that's out of a different fund or capital,
Capital.
right? And then,
If I may, you're absolutely right. It is a domino effect when you hire a new officer, especially if we're talking, 10 officers. There's more vehicles for sure. Right now, we have a 17 marked car fleet. That'll be a 20-car fleet if you get up to that 50 officer mark, sworn officers. You have uniforms. Uniforms are expensive. Not just the material, but the leather gear is expensive. You have weapons. The handgun we carry is, although we get the ones you guys recently approved, we had a pretty good deal on. I don't know if we can get that deal again on ordering more for the future. That's a, $600-700 weapon. We have rifles that are $1,000 a piece. We have training expenses on top of that. So it's a domino effect when you're talking about bringing on new officers.
Yeah. And my concern is that, I don't know if we're at the level right now where we need 50 sworn officers. Maybe we are, but the need is going to become greater as time goes on. I mean,
For sure.
While we like a safe community, it isn't just happening on its own. We're having to help provide that with the service that you provide and your people provide. But I'm just saying that as time marches on, in addition to the population increasing, I think it's inevitable that as your population increases, the level of crime increases, and the communities around us aren't necessarily decreasing crime either. So besides just looking at trying to contain costs, we've got to look at how are we going to continue to protect our community with the increasing issues that we're facing. Thankfully the economy is doing well right now, or we'd probably be seeing more crime, I would guess. I don't know, do you see that factor as well, that if the economy is poor, then crime increases? Or
Well, I know when we had the downturn or the recession previously, we saw a lot of a spike in property crime. However, what we didn't see was a lot of the driving offenses, the traffic safety issues. People weren't driving, but they were still doing other things to support themselves, support habits. I don't know. I say that there's an increase. However, I will say, just so you're aware, that last year, crime across the township was down, which is a credit to the men and women on the department and the fine work and their commitment to the community.
Mr. Atkin, or
Yeah.
Mr.
Yeah.
Mansour?
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to finish the couple questions I had.
Go right
So,
ahead. Where are you
could-
at?
well, let's see.
Just the number
Another
there?
page number here.
You have the line item?
It's
Or?
expense, second page expenses.
Second page of expenses, thanks. So legal and attorney fees, what is that line item? What is that?
So we switched labor attorneys. For a long time, we were with Keller Toma, and then after our representative, Attorney Fanny, moved on to a different position, superintendent made the decision to open it up and kind of see what's out there and what's available, and we ended up switching firms to Bodman Law. In my opinion, a good switch. I've had nothing but great success talking with Bodman Law. He may be able to better explain the expenses behind that. However, you don't know when you're going to need them. I will say that we are, while we do a lot of things really good, what we are not a police department that has a lot of substantiated lawsuits. In fact, there's been none since I've been the chief substantiated lawsuits. We're not a department that has a lot of substantiated grievances. Since I've been the chief, there hasn't been any. So we're doing things right, and not just me, but the whole team and department are doing things the right way. I think that's why you see some of the decrease in those attorney fees from what you may have seen in previous years.
Mr. Lemina?
We're also trying to be, one of the things that Bodman Law does bring to the table is they help us be more proactive versus reactive. One of the things we used to do with a lot of our legal fees was because we were responding to something, whether it be an employee issue or whatever. We're much more proactive. We had them review our employment manual, for example, and we're going to bring that to the board for adoption shortly. We've gone through all of our policies, we put all of our policies and procedures together and had that review done. We're trying to be much more proactive to make sure that we're doing the right things at the right time so that we don't end up having to defend ourselves. Although I assure you, we will continue to defend ourselves. If you have a police department, you're going to have lawsuits, and it just goes with it. But that usually then shifts to our liability carrier, PAR plan, and they have been very effective, like Chief Wiles said, have been very effective in in defending us and our actions.
Well, and we're in a litigious society, and anytime your people take an action, it's, potential legal situation for us. Ms. Lane?
Doesn't part of that legal include also Mr. Laddie's firm representing us in district court for our standard tickets and all of those issuances as well?
I do not know the answer to that.
It's a good question for Kathy. When you include all of the legal attorney's fees within the police department expenses, do we pick up some of Mr. Laddie's firm's expenses in there as well?
Not in the police department, it's charged in legal services.
Okay.
That, by the way, that is a large number, because as you can see, the activity that our department generates. I think in September you had perhaps 100 new cases, misdemeanors and drug writings and drug cases. So that's, on average, just 1,200 cases a year that are in the criminal justice system for Grand Blanc County. It's a lot of activity, and it's to the point where the district court is almost, I don't want to say overwhelmed, but they're squeaking under the load.
That's not included in the police.
Right. The district court downtown Grand Blanc, they've given us our own day. Before, we used to share a day with several municipalities. Now we have Grand Blanc Township Day to bring and work on all the cases that we bring down there.
Well, I've heard from a number of attorneys that they're thankful for all the cases they get in Grand Blanc Township. Ms. Lane?
All right, if you are increasing numbers in the district court, why wouldn't that legal expense, since it's related to the police department, be in the police budget instead of some other part of our budget?
I mean, it can be. It's still all coming out of the general fund, so we're budgeting. I mean, it's still a general fund expense, so we're not as worried about separating it out. If it was building, for example, and it's going to come out of that special revenue fund, or if it's in an enterprise fund, we've got to separate it out and make sure that it's accounted for. The police department is still a general fund expense. You can ask me the question, why do we put $50,000 worth of telephone expense under GIS-IT when that covers all of the telephones for
Right.
the police and
Clerk's
general
office,
office and
treasurer.
clerks, because it becomes a nightmare to try to manage it down to the
Whose
Okay.
phone is costing what? Right. Mr. Atkins?
I agree with Clerk Lane. I think I'd like to see what that number is to get a full snapshot of the police budget. It doesn't necessarily need to be carried over, or however Mr. Lemata wants to manage that. But more officers, more cases potentially, and if that's a pretty big number, I just kind of like to understand that part of it as well, because it's truly police generated expenses. And then another question here. Bear with me. Can you explain or walk me through the dispatch? How do we manage, or explain to me what dispatch is?
So we have 5 full-time employees that are dispatch/clerical. That's their contractual title. So that our dispatch center is staffed 24/7. So if a resident calls 424-2611, 24/7, someone from Grand Blanc Township's going to answer that phone and see what we can do to help them. What we see is we get a lot of non-emergency calls, or hey, my car was broken into last night, or I locked my keys in my car, stuff like that. We're still finding that the serious calls, if you will, not that those aren't serious, but the more emergency type style calls go through 911. Besides sitting there and answering phones, don't get the wrong perception, that's not what they do. They are also our record keepers for the department. We respond to over 23,000 calls for service a year. That generates a lot of paper, and while we do stuff all electronically right now, there is still a lot of paper that needs to be gone through. There has to be a lot of check and balance, entering stuff in the computer. They're responsible for that. They are the eyes and ears of the department. When someone calls for help, that's the first voice they hear. and they need to be able to provide proper assistance, send them to the right person to get that information.
The training for the dispatch, is that equivalent to, say, a 911 operator, or? how does
No.
that-
That said, though, that one of the things that we want to do is to increase their training to that level. Technically, we're not what's considered a PSAP. That PSAP, you need certain training to be that. Well, what we would like to do going forward is get all of our dispatchers to that level, so we can continue to improve on the service that they provide to our community and to our officers.
Well, a couple of other things that they do as well that I find valuable is they monitor the cameras for.
Absolutely.
And if we're looking at, we want the parks cameras to be able to be viewed. They're going to be the ones looking at those. Also, if there's a major water line break, one of the things, and we're still in the process of educating our residents to notify the police as soon as they see that, because we're paying for all that water to be dumped out onto the ground. And the quicker for our DPW people to get over there and stop that flow is saving all the ratepayers some money.
Yep.
So I think we got to do a better job of educating our residents that when they see that kind of thing, don't post it on Facebook, hey, there's water bleeding out into the street, call 911.
They are also actively involved in a couple of community engagement programs that we have. One is our vacation check program, where if someone's going out of town for X amount of days, they'll call up, and there's certain information that has to be obtained by the call taker. So officers are aware of that and can go out and check that residence once every 5 days for them to make sure everything's okay. Also, our senior citizen call-in, we have about roughly 15 senior citizens throughout the township. They call us every day, and they talk to those dispatchers, and they don't just talk to them, they are friends with those dispatchers. Sometimes that's the only people they talk to all day. And if they don't call us, we call them. And if they don't answer, we send an officer out there to make sure everything's okay. And unfortunately, a couple of times we've had to send officers out there and things weren't okay. But that's the program to help keep our residents safe, and it is greatly appreciated by families that may be out of state or out of the area.
Ms. Lane?
Chief, would you ever consider having our own PSAP here and utilizing the income from the phone lines to fund that dispatcher area?
I think it may be worth consideration, knowing there's a lot of stuff that has to be done to do it the right way. Like I said, our current level of training for our dispatchers / clerks up there does not meet what is necessary or required to be a PSAP operator. It just does not. So there'd be a certain training element. There would be a cost element, of course, as well. Sure, there's some financial stuff coming in from the taxes from the phones, but there's a financial element. We would have to hire additional people to be able to do that properly. I'd be hesitant to try to staff a full-time PSAP with part-time employees. I think that may be a discredit to the residents in the community. When they call and in need of emergency, they want someone that surely knows what they're doing and is vested in the department and the community.
Having served on the 911 commission or committee or whatever you call it, the advisory committee, what have you, I can tell you it is an extremely involved organization. I mean, I'm just saying there's a lot of moving parts to it, and I think there's a couple of layers of management even that you would have to have involved. You have to have a director for it, then you have to have supervisors for each shift. Then you have to find qualified people, and if we're looking at hiring more, and the training's pretty arduous. I don't know. Genesee County, I'm seeing that it's a organization. I don't know. I know
there's a lot of
there's
moving
municipalities
parts.
that do it, but in terms of us doing it, it would be a long-range view, I think, to get to that point. But I've only learned that since being supervisor of what's all involved. And if we're a matter of, hey, we can save some money, but I wonder if that's the case, though. Mr. Mansour?
I have a couple of follow-ons to that. Even if we were to be a PSAP point, we still need people on the road, someone to actually respond to it, right?
Absolutely.
So what's the difference if a call is taken on Miller or on Linden and Corona Road and dispatched here, or next door and I mean, it's still going to the same kind of group of people. So I'm not sure, how our community would necessarily benefit from that. So anyway, so going back to the question on the legal fees. So our activity is up, our employment of the legal services is up. What is there offsets to that? I mean, do we, the part of the judgments that we get, I mean, does that come back to offset?
There is, if, for instance, you know, last year, we stopped over 8,000 cars, 8,000 traffic stops.
Mhm.
What that does not mean is 8,000 tickets.
Right.
We do not do traffic enforcement as a way of a revenue generator. We just don't, and we won't.
Right.
But we wrote approximately a third of those received tickets for whatever the infraction was. When it gets sent to the court and it's dealt with in the court, it goes into like 6 different places. Very little of that actually comes back to Grand Blanc Township, just like, you know, taxes that, you know, all the residents here pay, and, you know, the county gets their bulk, and it's the same way with the traffic ticket. They get split all over the place, and we get very little of that back to Grand Blanc Township.
So in terms of the cost that it takes for us to litigate that or to represent ourselves versus the money we get back, we're saying that that's maybe a break even, not a break even?
Well,
Do we know? I mean,
a civil infraction, typically, if someone just pays that, say, yeah, I was speeding, I'm just
Yeah.
gonna, you know, be responsible and pay it.
Yeah.
We don't have anyone involved in that.
Sure.
That's just but if it's a misdemeanor charge, someone had a suspended license, they were drinking and driving, whatever the case may be, then certainly, there would be an attorney involved in working through that process with whatever defense counsel was there. So there'd certainly be a cost on our part for that.
As well as the cost of the officer probably having to appear in court as well.
For sure, there are contractual obligations that have to be met for payment of the officer when they're subpoenaed to court.
So really, it's not a wash when we pull somebody over for a DUI or what have you. It's probably costing us money at
costs
that
us
point.
money.
Yeah, I can't give you a figure on that, but monetarily, I would think you're probably correct. I mean, the good.
so that would lead to this, you know, more incidents, more likelihood to litigate, more expense in the legal to, okay. So I mean, I'm listening to your concerns, and I understand them about, you know, legalized marijuana and the additional commercial activity maybe in some places. But I mean, those things are, I mean, we've been talking about a lot of those for a lot of years. So, and they're not gonna, you know, spring up, you know, tomorrow. So, I mean, as we look forward here, I think we should plan ahead, but in terms of what our needs are for the community today, you know, we don't have a Myers on Baldwin and Holly, and we don't have a Tech Village yet, and marijuana laws aren't kind of in yet. So, I mean, I think we just have to kind of stage these things, recognizing that those are definite impacts to your department, and we need to address those. But it's not something that, you know, is, you know, right here in front of us, at least at this moment.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
And part of the reason for, you know, since I've been involved with the budgets, trying to get additional personnel, not only to increase our staff, but like I said earlier, we're in the next 6 years, we have the potential to lose a lot of officers all at once.
Good
And
point,
that
yeah.
knowledge, skill, and ability is gone. And to fill that could be quite challenging, trying to do that all at once.
And we probably don't want to, even if they were available, fill 6 positions all at one time and have 6 new officers coming on. I would imagine
That would
that's...
certainly be very taxing for our field
Right.
training program, yes.
Going back, I don't know if that was Mr. Atkins or Mr. Mance that you were asking about the population.
Thanks, Mr.
Yeah, change, you know, I don't know what year Heritage Park was built, you know, with Walmart and Sam's Club. What year was that built
Goodness.
or opened?
I think it's on the sign up there.
There's like
13.
5 or 6 or 7, 2006 or
Yeah, 2006 or 7, I think.
6.
Yeah,
6 maybe?
so,
No, it was before that,
Hmm.
because I would say more like 2004, because
Okay,
I
so
was on
somewhere
the
right in that
board
range.
when I was,
yeah. All I'm getting at is that, you know, we were looking at population and looking at increases in police, you know, service, but when you do add one of those, it does kind of jump things up a little bit, you know.
No
and-
question, but we also have,
Yeah.
property values that go up, and we have offsets in some of
Right.
those regards because we're collecting more taxes. So is it one, maybe not, but I
Except-
mean, there is something.
Well-
Interesting, you know, I know that's the case at Grand Blanc, where probably the level of police service that's required by a store like Walmart or Myers demands a disproportionate amount of attention from a legal perspective, and that's happening in Davidson Township. They've actually tried to quantify that. And they determined that the need for service is approximately 3 or 4 times more than the revenue they generate from taxes. And there's another big side to that, and that is, and this is something that Judge Odette has made a policy of his, which I think is good. It's very important because there is such a large attraction to shoplifting at Walmart, and Walmart dedicates a lot of resources to catching those people, that there is a understanding by certainly repeat offenders that if you shoplift in Grand Lake Township and you are caught, you are going to jail and you will be punished. And the police department dedicates a lot of time and attention to that policy, and so does Judge Odette. And it's certainly a community, it's a policy, right? I mean, it's something that you could say, well, let's not spend that much time on this issue. But I think it really leads to a lot of other positive enforcement effects and benefits to the community. So it's definitely not, the taxes do not pay for the amount of attention they need from a legal standpoint. But there are lots of other benefits to our enforcement and to their being here.
Well, Mr. Lehman has been very active with the dark stores legislation, which basically was a result of the big box stores not necessarily paying much in taxes compared to other types of businesses, right?
Yeah, and a big part of that conversation had to do with the amount of enforcement that comes when a new big box store opens up in your community, because we know that those are going to be targets for shoplifting, and we know that it's going to take easily, 20 or 30 hours a week from law enforcement that's just going to respond to retail fraud cases at those stores, let alone the traffic congestion and accidents and things. So we know that those come with a dollar amount. The frustrating part was they come in, and that case is still going through the Michigan Tax Tribunal right now. We'll see how it comes out with the Escanaba Menards, but it did go all the way to the Supreme Court, was remanded back to the Michigan Tax Tribunal, and they basically, they would open up a $10 million store and claim that it was already obsolete, and that the value of that store, the taxable value, was the value of the dirt that it was built on. And the Michigan Tax Tribunal has agreed up until this final case with the, it's going to be adjudicated this year yet and go back to the Michigan Tax Tribunal. It's going to be interesting to see how it comes out. So some of those are going to come back. It will help us, but the ones that have already been settled, those are gone and gone forever. It'll take you 20 or 30 years to get your value back again. Hopefully it's adjudicated before the new Myers opens up in Grand Blanc Township, so we can collect a few more tax dollars before we have to start hiring additional officers just to respond to that. And if I can, while you guys are thinking about that, Chief brings up a very valid point. 13 officers are eligible for retirement within 6 years. We absolutely can't have 13 new guys, even if we hired them over a 2-year period. Number one, it's really hard to recruit, and we work our tails off trying to recruit right now. It'll be really hard to recruit 13 guys. That having been said, when I turned down his request or didn't make my recommendation for his request, it has to do with some things that I want the board to make sure that you're thinking about as we talk about those numbers. Number one, we're going to go into contract negotiations next year in July for all the police contracts. So with that, think about the defined benefit plan that we have with MERS as the board's direction to me going to be to negotiate moving forward with that defined benefit plan. There could be a reason why we would want to hold off on hiring officers before we go into negotiations if there are going to be changes, because if you bring them in now, they're going to be under this current plan, and they bring with them some unfunded liability automatically that's going to come with that defined benefit plan. You've got a millage request that's going to come out in 2019 or 2020. So I think you really need to think about that as we move towards hiring, because if we pass a millage request that we talk about will be used to pay it on unfunded liability, and we hire 3 new officers and immediately add to the unfunded liability by putting them on the defined benefit plan, we're sending a message to taxpayers. I think that is a mixed message at the very least, and not one that's fiscally responsible or sustainable. And so I think if we think about those kind of things as we move forward, there is some method to my madness. And I agree that we can't hire 13 officers at once. It would put us in an untenable situation. But I do think that we can phase it in. I just didn't think that 2019 was an appropriate year. I will probably be more agreeing with him in 2020 and moving forward that we may need to increase our numbers by 1 or 2 a year as we move forward, so that we're staggering those coming in, and we'll probably have a much better feel of who we think is gonna be leaving at that time and coming on. So that was really my thought process, and when I turned down his request.
Chief, what reasons do people come to Grand Blanc for joining our police force? I mean, is it the pay? What is it that you use or your people use to try and get them to join our force?
Well, it's a number of things. One of the things that first catches their eye when they see Grand Blanc Township is hiring is we have a reputation. And it's a quality reputation, professional reputation. They know they're coming to an organization that does things the right way for the right reason. I can't tell you how many interviews I've sat on, and one of the questions we ask is, well, there's lots of candidates, why should we hire you? And one of the things they always say is, because Grand Blanc Township is a premier organization, and that's where I want to spend my career. I want to be part of that. So we create that environment for them. Also, we have great benefits. You know, the pay is comparable to other organizations around. Those things certainly don't detract anybody. We have a great facility. You know, we obviously, as everyone knows, we have a building over there that's second to none. And they walk up there and they say, "Oh, this is Genesee County?" No, this is Grand Blanc Township. And you know, we do things differently. We serve the community at a different level than a lot of other organizations, and we take great pride in doing it. And all those things I think are huge factors in having people see what we do, hear what we do, and then want to be a part of what we do.
Mr. Kuzak?
Yeah, one thing I wanted to point out, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're at 40 officers right now, right?
Correct.
And the budget says there's 43, so you can hire 3 new officers if you can find the qualified people that you want.
Correct.
So that's a step in the right direction, that we can at least get 3 new ones in, get them started, and then, like Mr. Limpton said, maybe years from now, we might be able to get some more. And we can't handle them all at once, so.
Right.
So at least we are moving forward. We're going from 40 to 43, hopefully within, what, a year and a half, you think, or?
It was my goal to have a full staff by the end of the year. We're going to make one more push before the end of the year to fill those open positions.
Okay.
Will we get them? I don't know. We'll see
Right.
we'll see what comes forward, but we're going to give it one more shot by the end of the year.
Okay, great. Well, good luck on that.
Thank you.
Mr. Atkins?
2 questions that I'm done. Question 1, going back to the Walmart or the issues at the big box store. What is the average time to process an arrest for retail fraud?
Well, keep in mind, when we go there for an arrest situation, it's not one officer. We send 2 officers.
So from the time
for
they
officer
show
safety
up,
purposes, we send 2 officers to that store. It would be wonderful if everyone that gets arrested would say, okay, I did wrong, you know, just take me to jail. That is not the case. That's why we send the 2 officers. From the time of their arrival on scene to get all the information from loss prevention or whoever called it in at the store, to interview the suspect, to process the suspect, to take them down to the county jail or the Flint City lockup, you're talking anywhere between 45 minutes to an hour.
that's it?
Yep.
That seems pretty quick.
Right, because one
I thought
time
it
I
was-
was at Walmart and
One time I was
our police was there.
Yep.
Okay,
Nothing
and
to
then
wait to
there
start.
wasn't just 2 cars, there was more than that. And I was in there for over an hour, and those cars were all still there. And then, when I left, I know one was investigating one of the cars. So I know you got better
Certainly
judgment.
depends on the type of call, but just a
Right.
routine
So a
shoplifting.
normal one could be an hour, but I
Yep.
think that one was way over that, but.
Yeah, you know,
there's
we've had obviously other incidents there that we've been there much longer, you know.
Right.
You probably can remember one that I reported out to you guys a couple months ago. That was not an hour we were there. We
Right.
were there several hours dealing
Right.
with that. And also keep in mind, we're not there just for shoplifters, you know. With any type of development in the community, we have accidents in the parking lot. We have people that lock their keys in their cars. We have people that lose their kids in the store or the parking lot. We respond to those as well. We have medical calls. So it's not just the shoplifters that takes us to, Heritage Park.
So you mentioned 45 minutes to process them initially, but then there's probably court time involved with that as well, right?
Potentially.
Oh, yeah.
Which could be a couple hours.
There is, and there's also a report, a fairly detailed report that will have to go by an officer, reviewed by Deputy or Sergeant, or does that. And also they'll have to submit the warrants to our office for review, and then they'll have to deliver the warrants to the court. So, and there also may be, because there's at least one officer at our trial dates at Grand Blanc Township. And so I would guess, and obviously you're the expert on this, but from what I see on my end, that extra process is gonna add another half hour, or 45 minutes to each of those arrests, I would say.
Certainly see that once it gets to the detective bureau side of it, through the report approval process, the detective gets involved, they have to, like we said before, they gotta get all the warrants prepared to get the warrants signed, get them down to court, show up for court. If you had all that in there, I certainly agree with you.
So there is additional benefit to us. I mean, I don't know what the penalty is for shoplifting, if they serve time or pay a fine or what have you, but, I don't know if certain communities just say, we're not going to prosecute them, just let them go, and
Yeah,
is that?
certain communities do, and Graham, like, Joe did that, and again, this has been his philosophy. You will spend time in jail if you're caught shoplifting in Grand Lake Township. And now, how we measure time in jail and whether a day counts for actually 2.5 hours, or the 2 days is 12 hours, you'll spend time in jail and you'll have a conviction for retail fraud, right?
I imagine the word kind of amongst the community gets out there then, that if you're gonna shoplift in Grand Blanc, you're gonna do some time, don't get caught, because they're not going to let you go.
I would agree.
Does that bleed over into other behaviors not occurring here because we are tough on that? I mean, I don't know. I'm
For
just
sure.
wondering if it's kind of the broken window thing.
So
You allow
there's-
one broken window,
I deal a lot with the community. I talk daily with, community members and people not just in Grand Blanc Township, but outside other areas of the county. And people know not to do a few things in Grand Blanc Township. Shoplift, because you're going to jail for sure, and the judge is going to put you in jail, and you don't drive drunk or impaired in Grand Blanc Township.
How about drug offenses? I know the FANG is very active in Genesee County for that, but given our population and the amount of the economy here, you would think that drugs could be rampant. But I see the number of arrests based on communities, and we don't look like we have a lot of that. And maybe part of it's deterrent that you don't do that here either. Is that?
Yeah, don't get the perception that there are not people who deal with drugs in Grand Blanc Township or the Grand Blanc community for that matter. That would be false.
Right.
There are. The good news is we have FANG, which does great work, and we relay a lot of information to them. But also we've been participated with FANG for so long now that after we take an officer out of FANG, they come back to the road here. So they carry all that expertise and knowledge they learned at FANG, and they give it to our guys here on the road. And when they come in contact with some of those people that may have drugs or narcotics or maybe lead in that direction, they can follow up that with them by themselves and not necessarily turn that over to FANG. So that's why you wouldn't see that any FANG report or FANG numbers.
But I'm just wondering if by being tough on those things,
For sure.
with shoplifting, we're deterring people from shoplifting, and maybe the same happens with drug crimes, that they know that don't do that in Grand Blanc because your chance of getting caught are a lot greater.
For sure.
Ms. Lane?
Where I worked in Oakland County, we didn't have a Walmart, but we had some other large institutions, and we had individual contracts with them where, like the schools, because they knew that they took such a substantial amount of our police officers' time, they made a voluntary contribution annually in lieu of taxes to supplement and to have that type of support. Have we ever considered doing that with some of these institutions?
I don't think to probably the level that you've seen in your previous municipality. I will say that for all the time that we do spend at Heritage Park, the businesses in that little business community there, they are great partners of ours. We work very well with them and their staff. They participate with us on some of our community engagement projects. They help us facilitate that and host and provide materials for that stuff. But as far as a written contract where there's some sort of financial mechanism in place, we haven't visited that at all.
Mr. Lemina?
Just a point, you can't require that. It's been found unconstitutional. Representative DeAndre from the 110th District tried to introduce legislation that way, and it was ruled unconstitutional. We can't require them. We know that even though they don't pay their fair share of taxes from the big box thing or whatever, some of those stores but they tried to introduce that legislation, and it wouldn't allow by the state constitution.
I had no intention of making it law. I was making it more
Voluntary?
a free voluntary contribution.
If we could just get them to voluntarily pay their taxes, we wouldn't need to do that.
If anybody wants to pay more to us, is that possible? I mean, I mean, we'll accept more money anytime, right?
We take cash.
Tax deductible.
I mean,
Right, we're tax deductible, so we'll take tax deductible contributions.
the school is basically doing that with our officers that are there, because
True.
that started years ago when we said, well, if you want an officer there, you'll have to be a partner with us, because we can't afford to pay everything, and the amount they pay doesn't cover one complete officer or their benefits. So it's a voluntary cooperative effort, and that's all I'm talking about.
Well, and they have crime prevention individuals at those stores, I believe, right?
They do.
I think I know a few of them from being in there, but not getting caught. Mr. Atkins?
My final question from a couple minutes ago was the overtime. With more officers, less overtime, or what's the driver behind the overtime within your department?
So it's a couple different drivers. There's those things that can't really be expected or planned for. You know, occasionally we do have significant crime. You know, we may have a homicide in the township or something like that. That takes some overtime. There's no doubt about that. There's events like the Allied Challenge, which put a hit in our overtime budget this year. That, you know, we first year in, but now we're going to plan for it going forward. We should be more manageable. Any of the community engagement stuff, that is not overtime stuff. We plan for that. We have people that volunteer just because they want to be part of it, come in on their own time, that kind of stuff. So a lot of the driver is they take a late call or finish up reports, so they need those reports completed prior to the end of their shift, before they go home, so we can get warrants for the individual the next day, that kind of stuff. That's the main driver of the overtime. Someone calls in sick and shorts the shift, we may call in someone on overtime to fill that spot, depending on how many people are scheduled to work. So really, finishing reports, filling gaps in shifts due to the illness or vacation, so those are the two main drivers of the overtime.
Okay.
Mr. Mansour?
Chief, I'd just like to thank you for, standing up here for the last couple hours and fielding these questions. Your ability to kind of go into each one of the line item details, I think, speaks highly of the time that you spent preparing that and your thought process for the narrative here. So I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Mr. Massey?
Yes. My final question to you, Chief. You told us a few weeks ago that all of the states that have passed marijuana laws, crime has gone up. That's a true statement, right, from you?
I don't know if I said all states, but I know the states that I mentioned, Colorado in this case, that is a true statement.
Okay, Colorado. So if the marijuana law is passed here in Michigan by the voters, I assume we can anticipate that crime rate is going to go up.
I think that would be a fair assumption. If we can look at some of these other states, see some of the problems or successes that they've had, that we will probably have similar problems or successes here in Michigan.
Thank you.
Well, and it's not necessarily just crime either, right? We're looking at, I think Colorado had a 48% increase in traffic fatalities.
True.
There was a fatality near our community this afternoon. That's it's horrible to have those situations. And you talk about devoting resources. There's probably 6 or 8 police cars there, several emergency rescue vehicles.
Yeah, if you have a crash like that, and without going into great detail, that was 7 vehicles involved. There was a fatality. The number on US 23, about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. There's a lot of resources required to properly police that, investigate that, close the road, and try to get that traffic moving, because the longer that traffic sits still, the loss in revenue in other areas where some of those commercial vehicles and workers are trying to get to.
But the statistics that I read for Colorado was a 48% increase, which just blew me away.
Correct.
I don't know, what it will be here in Michigan, but you look at this, purely, at a budget standpoint, and we could see a dramatic effect on our budget this next year when it comes to law enforcement. The jury's still out, I guess, to see what would happen here in Michigan. Right. But I think, our response time is one of the things that I think Blanc Township, I don't know that, if you surveyed residents, that probably isn't top of mind, but I think, in talking to a business owner, and I know we were together at an event and we were talking to a business owner in another community. I won't mention which community, but it was, you know, an out-county area that we were talking to the business owner, fairly large business, and I was asking him, or he was asking me about police and what have you, and he said that he generally beats the police in his community to his business whenever there's an alarm call. And he doesn't live next door to the place either. He lives several miles away. And I told him that if that were to occur in Grand Blanc Township, you would not beat our police to your business, that our police would be there waiting for you. And I think one of the keys to Grand Blanc growth is that we do have great response times, and that you look at the number of closed cases that we have, you know, that we don't just respond, you know, show up and then that's it. We actually research it and find out who's responsible for that case, and we've had situations resolved in the same day that in some communities might take months.
So at our banquet last year, I mentioned our closure rate of our cases is about 65%, which is unheard of. You look just around Genesee County, there are departments in Genesee County that are in the teens in their closure rates. Most of them are around 30, 40, maybe a couple close to 50, but no one near where we are with 65% closure rate.
The difficult part, I think, for us as a board is that we want to maintain that response time. We know that we have challenges, you know, coming at us over the next several years, whether it's the marijuana law or just, you know, population growth or the number of businesses that move here. But at the same time, we've got to balance it with, you know, what can our taxpayers afford to pay? And I know that all the taxing entities need more money for, you know, whether it's education or college or libraries, what have you. And the township receives the smallest portion of those taxes that we collect. We end up, people think that, you know, all the taxes they pay stay right here in Grand Blanc Township, and we continue to beat that drum that I think it's 17%, right, that we keep here in the township of all the taxes that an individual pays for property taxes. So, you know, if you pay $2,000 in taxes, 17% of that stays here for fire, for police, our administration, what have you. And we need to be able to afford, you know, greater protection. So it's really a tough spot that our board is in, to be able to do our due diligence, but then not tax people out of the community either. So it's a tough spot that we have to find some way to thread that needle. But we appreciate what the police do, and we want to see you be able to keep doing the job that you're doing.
I appreciate it.
Any other input or questions? Otherwise, we appreciate your time this evening, Chief.
Absolutely,
And thank you.
Always available.
And thank you to our finance director as well, Kathy, for being here tonight, too.
Ready to adjourn?
I think, Ms. Mansur,
Make a motion to adjourn.
I'll support it.
all those in favor say aye.
I
Any
missed
opposed?
that.